Hello guys, welcome to the second part of your fourth lesson of your programming fundamentals. And in this particular lesson or section of the lesson 4, we're going to do a practical demonstration of the if statement, the if and else statement, the if, elif, and else statements. All right, my name is still George Bamfo. All right, so if you remember, in our previous session, we looked at the concepts for if or the selection statement. We saw an example using what we said the person gets a mark which is greater or equal to 80 being the condition, and we want to say if a person gets a mark greater or equal to 80, we say that this person has passed, and that was what we said for the if statement. So let's move on to do a practical demonstration. So first off, we need to have a variable called mark and give it a value. So that will be dependent on what a person's grade is. So for now, let's say a person's grade is 90. So we'll move on to the next line and also say, use the if statement. So we'll say if person's mark. So if mark is greater or equal to 80, that'll be a block of code. Then we'll say, we'll print you passed. Now, when we run this code, it should tell us you passed. Why is that the case? Because first off, we had a mark. So first off, we had a mark which was 90, and that was checked against whether or not. So if the mark is greater or equal to 80, so we can see that 90, which is the person's mark, is greater than 80, which means that particular statement here is true. And as we mentioned, if the condition is true, it will have to go and execute what is inside the block. And what's inside the block is what we have here as you passed. Now, there's something very particular about this block of code. You could see that after the if statement, there is a colon. This is to signify that we're now entering the block of code. So we have a colon, and once you hit your enter key, it's what this particular thing will just occur. It will take you to a different part. So that's what we call indentation. So after the colon, when you hit your enter, it will shift the cursor to the right, and then you write your print into bracket, you passed. And don't forget, it has to be a string. Now, the question now is, what if a person gets a mark below 80? So this first case, we use a person's mark being above 80. So let's see if we consider a person's mark below 80. So I'll give the person, say 70. So 70, and let me run the code again. I run that, and I go back to my block of code and run that. It doesn't print anything. It still executes, but it doesn't print anything. The issue is this. You have a condition which is set at, so set at 80, and the person got 70. So when we get here, it's checked against this, and we don't meet the condition. So this block of code is not going to be executed. So we don't see it saying you passed. But rather, when it gets here, it uses another part, which is the false bit of it. And that particular part, nothing happens because we didn't take into consideration what happens if this particular block of code is not true. And this is what leads us to the second part of our code, or the second part of our practical demo, where we consider a case where there is an else statement. So we'll skip this one and move on to a case where you have an else statement. All right. So we'll say if mark. So let's start with else. So if and else. All right. This is just the way to comment, and I'm sure you might have seen it from subsequent previous videos. So here we're going to look at this particular condition again. So we'll use mark equal. This time around, we're still going to maintain the 70, and then we'll go on to say if mark is greater or equal to 80. There again, we put the semicolon at the end, or a colon at the end, sorry. and then we have to print you passed. Now we know for sure if we run this code and then we run this, nothing happens. And this is why we have to take into consideration the else part of it. So once you get here, you click your enter key, it takes you here, and then you go to the backspace on your keyboard, and it's more like you're trying to erase something once, and it takes you to the starting of it. So you say else, because the else is just taking into consideration when the situation is false. All you have to do is to just put a semicolon at the end and click, sorry, the colon. I keep saying semicolon, but it's the colon, and you press your enter key. So we'll say print, and then this time around we'll say, sorry, try again. Yeah. So at this point, what we're saying is, looking at what we had earlier on, we have a mark 70, and if the mark is greater or equal to 80, then we print the first statement, which is you passed. Otherwise, if it is not true that the mark is greater or equal to 80, then we have to print the second block of code, which says, sorry, try again. Now, we all know that the first condition, which is checking to see whether the mark is greater or equal to 80, is not going to be true because the mark is 70, which is below the mark. So we'll skip this block, and then we'll have to print this block. So let's see whether that happens when we run this particular cell. So when I run it, it says, sorry, try again. And this is because that particular condition was not true. Okay, so what if, instead of checking to see whether a person passed or not, we have other conditions like we saw in the previous one. So you may have a situation where we want to give categories or classifications of grades. So you have, if a person get 80 or above, we'll say that a person is grade A, and if a person gets 79 to 70, we say a person got grade B. But if a person got 69 to 60, we'll say a person got grade C. Otherwise, we'll say a person failed. Anything else, which is more likely to be 59 downwards up to 0. So what we have to do is the next session. So I'll just click on that. Then I'll come here, and this time around, I'll name it if, elif, and else. As we saw in our previous session, so we said this particular one will go as a first condition. Condition 1 will always go with the if. If there's more than 2 conditions, the second one will go with elif. So that's condition 2. Condition 3, because there's another condition below that, we also have elif, and we check to see whether this is the last condition. If not, we'll still maintain the elif. If it is the last condition, then we'll say else. All right, so let's see this in action. Now I'll go on to the next line, and this time around I'll say if the mark is greater or equal to 80, I'll put my colon there, and I'll print A. Next line, backspace. 1 second. So let me just make space here. So backspace, and then I'll say, because there's a second condition, I'll say elif, if mark is, I'll say greater than or equal to 70, then I'll say print B. Backspace again, elif, if mark is greater or equal to 69. No, yeah, 60. So I'll say print C. And if there is another condition, which is the final condition, I'll say else. I'll print sorry, try again. So now what we have to do is we need to, so I skipped one, so I could just put that here. I'll say the mark. We'll put any mark there. For now, let's put maybe 80. We're going to check against all the conditions. So say 80, we run that. 80 is greater or equal to the first condition. So definitely this is going to print A. So let's run this and see what it prints. So when you run this, it prints A. So what if we change the mark to maybe somewhere in between 79 and 70? So we can say 72. And we run that block of code. And then we come to the next cell and because we want to check whether at this point we know it's not going to be greater or equal to 80. So we check against the second condition, which is going to state that it's going to be a B because it falls within the second range. So when I run that, it's a B. So let's see if we take any mark between 69 to 60. It could be even 60. So let's take 60. We run that and then we run the block. You should print a C. Let's print a C. And what if we print a mark which is below 60? So we'll say 20. We run that and then we run the second cell and it says sorry, try again. So this is how you use your selection statement. All I advise you to do is to play around this, and then if you have any challenge, let me know and I'll always be timely by responding to it as soon as I see the notification. Don't forget to go into the same lesson and check the assessment and do that, because that's also a condition for you in order for you to move on to your next lesson. Thank you very much and catch you in the next lesson.